It's the picture of suburbia. Identical cookie-cutter homes sitting side by side. A real-life Pleasantville where working-class mums and dads try to achieve the all-American dream. Or so you think. Under this roof, in the middle of it all, lived a secret depravity. The worst of human behaviour, thinly disguised as one big, happy family. When you saw Louise's mugshot on TV, did you recognise her as your sister?
She looks so different. You know, you can look at someone in their eyes and you can kind of, you know, see a lot into them, you know. And with her, it's just like she was dead inside. And she was kind of had like a smirky grin. That really made me mad.
Hello?
On the 14th of January, a 17-year-old girl rang 911, claiming to have escaped from this house in Paris, California.
They are abusive, and 2 of my sisters are chained up.
The 17-year-old said she and her 12 siblings were held captive, subjected to repeated abuse, torture, and starvation by the very people they should have trusted most. Their parents, David and Louise Turpin.
They began to be tied up, first with ropes and then using chains and padlocks.
What police found behind this closed door is beyond comprehension. Children chained to their beds, others starved to near skin and bone. A torture chamber covered in filth and the stench of rotting animals.
The abuse and severe neglect intensified over time and intensified as they moved to California.
But according to the person who knew Louise Turpin best, her sister, Teresa Robinette, the horrific truth of this tragic situation can be traced back to a family secret that turned her once naive sibling into a cruel, sadistic psychopath. The circumstances of her childhood are pretty grim.
Yeah.
How much of an impact do you think that's had on this outcome?
In my heart, I feel like a big part of it. You hear people say, you know, sometimes the abused can become the abuser, but I'm so angry with her right now. It's hard for me to give her any excuse.
You know, when I think about my mom's house, I can still picture it the way it looked when she was alive.
Teresa and her brother, Billy Lambert, rarely come back here to their hometown of Princeton, West Virginia. Despite its natural beauty, it will always be the birthplace of the cycle of abuse that has forever tormented their family. So this is where it all began for you?
Yes.
Where it all started. And this is the house that you and Louise were brought up in?
Yeah. This looked like a happy home on the outside, but inside it was miserable.
For you then, being here now,
It's sad.
does it evoke memories of love or anxiety?
Hurt. Sorry.
They must run very deep.
I wasn't gonna cry.
You okay? For Teresa, the family home in Princeton is the original House of Horrors. If ever there was any defense of Louise Turpin's future abusive behavior toward her own children, this is it. As little girls, she and Teresa were repeatedly sexually assaulted by their grandfather. And worse still, their own mother condoned and encouraged it.
Louise went through the same thing we went through with my grandfather, which was probably the darkest, hardest thing for any of us girls to deal with.
Your grandfather abusing you?
Oh yeah, bad. My mom would take us to him daily. She was pretty much selling us for money to live on. And that's how it is. I mean, I don't like saying it like that, and it breaks my heart. But it is what it is. You know, I mean, that's what it is.
He was taking it out on his granddaughters. That's almost unbelievable.
What people don't realize is, you know, like, It's his house of horrors. Like, that's where it all began.
The family were devout Pentecostal Christians, and it was here, at this church in the early 1980s, that Louise met David Turpin. She was barely a teen, and he was in his 20s. But the two fell in love, and as soon as she turned 16, Louise seized an opportunity to escape her recurring nightmare at home by running away with David.
I used to pick on him all the time and joke with him because he was the geek, the nerd, and I was like, well, Louise didn't marry handsome, but she married rich. She gets anything she wants.
In the space of 15 years, David and Louise had 8 children, raising them with military precision and routinely dressing them in uniform clothing. From the outside, the Turpins lived a life of wealth and success. David was a highly paid engineer, and they would fly the family, including brother Billy, to visit them every year.
We thought that she had the perfect life, she had the perfect husband, we thought that she was happy. Anytime they wanted something, they did it, because we always saw pictures of them going to Disneyland or going to Las Vegas.
I promise to love you tender.
And we're like, well, you kind of have to have money to keep going to Las Vegas. Face to face, I thought they were just a normal, happy family.
It's still unclear why, but in 1998, something changed in the Turpin household. Louise and David completely withdrew, not only from their family, but also from the outside world. They were secretly bankrupt, which meant an end to the yearly holidays. And in the first of many strange signs, they began to homeschool all 8 of their children. Teresa also noticed the kids didn't look quite right.
There was Skype for a while, and we would make comments. I remember making the comment that they were all so little. I remember Louise laughing it off, and, well, they're just going to be tall and lanky like David, But they didn't look severely malnourished. They looked healthy. They just looked small. I think she clothed them in a way that we couldn't see. And I think when the questions started, she cut off visual contact and just talked to us on the phone.
She was pretty cunning, wasn't she?
Yeah.
But she went out of her way to keep it going.
Yeah, for a long time.
Didn't you think it was strange that she was homeschooling all those kids?
Yeah, and her excuse to us was, well, the crime rate's always bad, or the kids are getting picked on too much and I don't like them feeling, down on themselves.
She was committing the biggest crimes.
She was doing the worst of it, yeah.
What no one knew then, but we all know now, is this pretense of at-home education was masking abuse behind closed doors.
I don't want to alarm people that are homeschooled, but maybe we could do a little bit more auditing for situations like that. Maybe we can learn that, hey, why is it that people are homeschooling their kids? Is it because it's best for the kids, or is it because it's best to keep their secrets?
We've been sleeping in there.
Okay, why is this door locked? Okay, can you move that out and open the door?
Sadly, in America, what happened to the Turpin 13 is not an isolated case. J.C. Dugard was 11 years old when in 1991 she was abducted by psychopath Philip Garrido. He repeatedly raped her and held her captive for 18 years.
The hidden backyard had sheds, tents, and outbuildings where JC and the girls spent most of their lives.
Alison Jacobs was the police officer who uncovered Garrido's sadistic crimes and says, just like the Turpins, he got away with the brutality for too long because his victim, JC, became conditioned to her reality.
And it's frustrating as a law enforcement or anyone if the victims aren't asking for help. Because if they're not asking for help or giving any kind of clue that there's something wrong, how is anybody really to know? With the Turpins, if the kids never said anything was wrong, maybe they don't even think anything was wrong with how they were growing up. That was their normal, and they were perfectly fine with it.
But they're conditioned, aren't they, from day one?
Yes, of course. They're conditioned from day one. And they don't know anything different. So why would they ask for help?
Coming up, a failed escape. The kid's horrible existence was almost uncovered when the eldest child plucked up the courage to run away. Suspicions raised.
Evil is very deceptive.
It can look good from a surface if you don't get in there too deep.
But why didn't the neighbours act? You two never thought for a moment to pick up the phone? That's next on 60 Minutes. If ever there was a perfect place to hide a secret life from the world, Rio Vista, Texas is a standout choice. Rural properties separating neighbours by big yards. This is another house of horrors in this sad, sordid tale of the Turpin 13. By the year 2000, David, Louise, and 8 of their kids were living in this home, isolated from family who they'd never see in person again. Behind closed doors, their cruelty and severe neglect had well and truly begun to escalate. What did you think?
Thought it was going to be great. Our kids are finally going to have some other kids to play with. We're out in the country. We're by ourselves and lonely, and we thought we were going to have some nice neighbors.
Ricky and Shelley Vineyard and their daughters, Ashley and Barbara, spent a decade living right across this gravel road from the Turpins in Rio Vista. Even with distance separating them, it was clear there was something disturbing about their new neighbours.
Ashley would go over there and play with them. I think that she may have been the only friend that they ever had.
Right. Well, she
all the other kids would make fun of them because they said they smelled bad, they were dirty, they had weird haircuts, they wore weird clothes.
So at the start, she was allowed to play with them?
Yes, until it got weird. And then I had to pull her back. I had come across the kids out there with Ashley. One of the younger girls looked at the older girl, and then I noticed how white her hands were. At first, I thought they were gloves. And I said, whoa, I thought you had gloves on there for a minute. And she goes, you wash to the wrist or else you're wasting water. And the way she spoke was really, strange, like she might be a little slow.
She was telling you that she'd been told not to wash
past the wrist.
Above the wrist.
Or you were wasting water.
When the Turpins came here to rural Texas, they had 8 children. By the time they left, 10 years later, they'd added another 4. It was also here that the kids' horrible existence was almost uncovered when the eldest child plucked up the courage to run away. She was picked up a little way down this road by a neighbour, but sadly, due to the extreme malnourishment and her lack of education, everyone simply thought she was mentally challenged and she was returned to her parents.
After that happened, you started seeing the kids outside again during the daylight and in the evenings, and then they'd pull them back in, and then after a couple of weeks, they withdrew them again.
You two never thought for a moment to pick up the phone and maybe...
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe ring someone?
We thought about it, but then again, you're out in the country and you mind your own business, and you figure they want their business kept to themselves also, and you don't realize what you're seeing. Evil is very deceptive. It can look good from a surface if you don't get in there too deep.
By 2010, as David and Louise Turpin's secret perversions were beginning to become more obvious in Texas, they moved across country to California. What they left behind is something Ricky Vineyard will never be able to erase from his memory.
We walked off into the house. Desks were lined up where they had the little homeschool. They had a giant whiteboard, but the house smelled of funk. All of the closets had padlocks. The refrigerators had padlocks. All the cabinets had padlocks. Everything in the house was locked down.
They had brand new bikes sitting on the carport, and they just sat there and rotted. Never got played with.
Yeah, it was like mental torture where you put the toy in front of a child, but you can't play with it.
Were there beds?
Yeah, there were beds. There were bunk beds, but there were ropes on the bunk beds.
Some of them didn't even have mattresses anymore, just looked like the mattresses had rotted.
There were dead cats. While we were wading through this mess, there were rats jumping up. I like to think I'm fairly clean, but man, that right there was disgusting. It was a house of horrors, a true house of horrors. You know, it was right up under our nose, and we didn't see it.
In hindsight, then, you now think you definitely should have told somebody.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, if we saw it again, we'd recognize it for what it is.
What that is, for police officer Alison Jacobs, is a missed opportunity to alert authorities to children in danger.
She should heal. She should move on.
Having saved kidnapping victim J.C. Dugard back in 2009, she believes part of the responsibility lies with neighbours like the Vineyards to raise the alarm if there's any fears or doubts.
It's a fine line, and it's a very difficult gray area. But it all comes back to not ignoring your gut. Humans have great instincts and intuition, and we choose to ignore it. And I don't know why.
Do you feel a bit guilty now?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
People are so afraid to be wrong. If you call on your neighbor because you think something's a little suspicious, and if someone follows up, nothing's wrong. Well, at least you tried. You did your part. That's all you can do is your part.
Coming up, searching for reasons why. You reckon they found some cult?
What else would make you do something like that? That's just pure evil.
But a frantic phone call
Can someone help me?
leads to help at last. Why do you go through all the pain and all the rest to have 13 children and then treat them like that? That's next on 60 Minutes. After settling in California in 2010, Louise Turpin, now 47 years old, gave birth to her and husband David's 13th child. The domestic torture chamber was in full flight, and even though several of the children were adults, all 13 were rarely allowed out. They were often chained to their beds, fed once a day, bathed once a year, and had no communication with the outside world. At the same time, Teresa Robinette says her sister and David had been pulled into a vortex of new temptations, including partying, gambling, and sexual exploits.
Louise had called me. She just told me that her and David had walked away from the church. They had been looking into other religions, but then eventually they did dabble into witchcraft. And I know that for a fact. She even talked to me about it, because I told her that, that was a scary thing.
You reckon they found some cult that they decided?
Something evil it had to be. I mean, because where else, what else would make you do something like that? That's just pure evil.
How do you still make the leap from maybe being completely stupid in your private life to torturing and abusing your children?
See, that's what I don't get. I knew they were making some wrong choices, but I never in a million years would have thought that it had anything to do with danger to the kids.
In the very early hours of January 14 this year, David and Louise Turpin's 17-year-old daughter finally made a run for it. It was an escape she'd been planning for more than 2 years. She called 911 from a disconnected phone.
Can someone help me?
With the extraordinary story that she and all her siblings had been held captive by her parents.
They are abusive, and 2 of my sisters are chained up.
She'd never seen a police officer, didn't know what a hospital or medication was. But her brave act meant finally the 13 prisoners were free.
Neighbors say they are simply in shock.
It seemed that the mother was perplexed as to why we were at that residence.
I literally, was froze to my couch. I could not believe what I was hearing. It was crazy. It was like a whole new family. It wasn't even it was a whole new, everything was a lie. Was my first thought, everything was a lie. All the stories and the conversations and the hours of, it was all a lie. It was all a lie.
All 13 victims were severely malnourished and mentally underdeveloped. The Turpins' 29-year-old weighed just 37 kilos. The 17-year-old had the IQ of a first grader.
I thought they were isolated, no friends came over, no family came over.
I just can't understand that it went for so long without being recognized.
It's almost hard to believe, but neighbours living just metres away denied any knowledge of the unfathomable conditions those children were living in. For Louise's brother Billy, that's something too difficult to accept.
I'm disappointed at the neighbors. One had which said that they were marching in a circle at nighttime upstairs and they saw them in the window. To me, that seems a little strange right there. I mean, I would at least go knock on the door and be like, is everything okay? There was another neighbor that came forward that said 2 of the older boys were digging in the trash cans at night. So to me, how's that not a red flag?
All your nieces and nephews appear to have been starved, psychologically abused, most certainly, held captive in various ways. Do you think your sister Louise is capable of that sort of stuff?
She shocked us, that's for sure.
If found guilty, Louise and David Turpin face 94 years in prison for their sick crimes. Their 13 children, who are currently in the care of the state, have already been dealt life sentences, dealing with the psychological and emotional damage created by their wicked parents.
I called the lawyer's office today.
Teresa Robinette and Billy Lambert have only this voicemail from Louise, left just 2 days before her arrest, as the final memory of a sister they now say is dead to them.
All right, Billy. Love you. Bye-bye.
Why do you go through all the pain and all the rest to have 13 children and then treat them like that?
I have said the same thing. And what makes me so mad is, we would ask her, are you going to have any more kids? Are you done? And she would literally tell us, like, she wants 20. She don't care if she has 25. She's going to keep having them till God won't give her any more. And
so we can only be eternally grateful that she didn't have 20.
Oh, yeah. Or 14.
Your sister has repeated the cycle of abuse, hasn't she?
Yes. All the abuse together that she went through, I think, made her mind whatever her mind was. I think it destroyed her self-worth and made her think that that was okay, maybe.
What does justice look like for your sister?
In my head, there is no justice for what she's done to those babies. So I really hope they're getting what they deserve in prison, and that's just the way I look at it. I have absolutely no pity.
You happy to throw away the key?
Yeah, absolutely. Let them deal with her in there, and David.
Hello, I'm Liam Bartlett. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.